So you have here, and of course, it's very beautiful handwriting. You can see here, this is the letter Q, right? Look at down here, see that? Q with a long tail. So it was actually quite elegant. And then every once in a while, you can see a bird over here, and a bird is flying around. Sullen flight of birds. So we think that maybe they're onto something. This could be the only actual self-portrait of Leonardo. He was a youth. Now comes the Mona Lisa, the Louvre. The date given was 1503 to 1506. He carried it with him for a long time, and he died with it in France. So, big question, why didn't he just give the Mona Lisa to somebody else? To whoever, to the lady, to her husband. Why did he carry it with him? The theory is, she did get it, so he made another one. Oh, so where's the first one? Nobody knows. Maybe it's in the collector's. Maybe some collection somewhere, but we don't know. Now, who was Mona Lisa? Vasari, 1550. Vasari was a self-proclaimed student of Michelangelo. Michelangelo didn't really have students or apprentices, but at least he doesn't say he did. But Vasari did study with him for a little while as an apprentice, so perhaps it makes him a student. He identifies her as Lisa la Gioconda, or La Gioconda, as she's called. Now, in 2005, this is 4 years ago, 2005, this guy, Armin Schlechter, Heidelberg, is studying an incunable edition of the works of Cicero, written in 1477. So he goes into the library at the University of Heidelberg, picks up this really old book, dated 1477. And there's a margin note right here. That's a margin note from a book on Cicero. See the margin note? And it actually says something very interesting. That in fact, the fellow that owned the book actually, thank God, put his name at the front of the book. His name was Agostino Vespucci, much like the explorer. Same name as Vespucci, the explorer. And Agostino Vespucci was known to art historians as being a friend of Leonardo. Oh, this is really cool. And he writes in here that actually Leonardo is currently working on a portrait of Lisa del Gioconda. And he writes the date, October 1503. You can actually see here. October 1503. Wow. What a fluke! We actually do know who she is. So who she isn't is an effeminate portrait of himself, because that's one of the theories that goes around. And all sorts of things. I mean, there's all kinds of theories about who the Mona Lisa is. But who she was a historical figure. She did exist. She was the wife of this man. And Lisa del Gioconda was in fact who was being pictured because Agostino Vespucci says so. He was actually doing it in October of 1503. So now we know finally, this has been settled, who she is, because we trust that Agostino Vespucci would have written the truth. I mean, he probably thought of himself, he realized that Leonardo was an important person at that time, obviously. He's 10 years away from his death, but he has a fame that is amazing in Europe, especially in Italy and in France. And so comes the Mona Lisa, right? It should be Mona because she's married. And so now we know that it's a portrait of the wife of Francesco da Gioconda, who was a famous Florentine textile merchant. Let's look at the world of Leonardo. So the period we're looking at is 1440 to 1520. 1300s, you have Brunelleschi. He's the man who invented perspective, which of course is used by architects and engineers everywhere in the world. He invented it. This man was amazing. He also built a dome. He actually physically built a dome of Florence and the cathedral. Then comes Leon Battista Alberti, who took the theory of Brunelleschi for perspective and perfected it mathematically. So he wrote a book on it. So this is before. Then there's Piero della Francesca, 1492, who we also know mathematicians. He's sort of a mathematician and an artist, and a very good artist at that. He applies many mathematical principles to his art. Then comes Fra Luca Pacioli, who is known to most accountants in the world as having created the double column accounting scheme. And he was also important because he's the one that basically taught Leonardo his first advanced math. We know that. Leonardo says that. At the same time, the printing press is created in 1440. That's 12 years before Leonardo was born. The printing press is on. It's also the age of exploration. So while Leonardo is doing all this stuff in Europe, all these guys, Columbus, Cabot, Vespucci, they're discovering the Americas. This is the same time. Copernicus is born 1479. Of course, his ideas are going to revolutionize the whole solar system, the way we view the world. And the first watch was created in Nuremberg in 1477. That's interesting because in one of his manuscripts, actually, he took a watch apart. He took a watch apart. You could see little gears, this gear's here, this gear's here, this gear's here. And he draws them perfectly, it's typical Leonardo style. And he leaves behind his notebooks. For Leonardo, painting is a science by which visible objects are recreated in permanent shape. They didn't have cameras in those days, right? No cameras, no VCRs, no TVs, nothing. Since the exact sciences must be stated in mathematical terms, Leonardo insists that the student of painting must be grounded in mathematics. But he only says this much later in life, after he's met Pacioli, and Pacioli teaches him about Euclidean geometry, which you've all studied at some point, like similar triangles and things of this sort. And the union of art and mathematics is the basis of perspective. That's a fact. Just read Alberti's book. You'll see that. Kenneth Clark, former art historian, Leonardo's scholar. Leonardo's admonitions to the reader. In one of his manuscripts, he writes, "Non mi legga, che non è matematico." In other words, don't even try and read this stuff unless you're a mathematician. I mean, 12 years later, he would have said nothing about that. But as soon as he learns the mathematics, he realizes, oh my God, this is so fundamental that really you do need the mathematics in order to understand the principles of nature, which of course was his lifelong dream to actually understand. So let no one who is not a mathematician read the elements of my work. Now notice, this is in Windsor Castle, Treatise on Anatomy. This is interesting. Why anatomy? What do you think? Got this treatise on anatomy, right? He's dissecting bodies, and then he's got this margin note with this in it about mathematics. But you got to think about the way he thinks, right? So he's thinking he's got paper lying around, and he's using whatever he has at his disposal to write his ideas on. And many researchers do this. We just take whatever paper there is. Oh, that paper. Oh, yeah, that's got this. Well, this is a good paper. Maybe I should keep this one. So maybe I'll write in the back. You start writing something on it because you know you'll go back to it later on because you like this paper, right? Or you like what you've written on this sheet. So we know he carried all the sheets with him. And paper was expensive. He might not be able to get it that easily. So he would write over old stuff. Okay? Treatise on anatomy. On manuscript G, which we can't really identify other than say it's manuscript G, no certainty exists where none of mathematical sciences can be applied. So then, the mathematical world of Leonardo, you got Euclid's Elements, and he learns that from Pacioli, which is a study of triangles, metric geometry, the measurements, triangles, circles, ruler and compass constructions, very important. Applications, perspective, Alberti and Leonardo. Then you've got the quadrivium. This is the universities of the time, Bologna, all the big ones, where you're taught basically 4 subjects at the master's level: arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Notice the first 2 are mathematics, and then comes music and astronomy. And the properties of numbers, Euclidean geometry, harmonics, and music, cast shadows, all this stuff would have been part of the arithmetic and geometry. So we figure he at least had a master's in math, because he knew all this stuff inside out. Here's Luca Pacioli. Here's one of the Platonic solids next to him. I figure that we're not quite sure who that is. Perhaps the patron ordered the painting done. And his apprenticeship begins in 1496, so he's 44, right? And here's part of his mathematical observations. You see a lot of multiplications. Look at the way he multiplies 9422 by 200, 0, 0, 0. This is the old way, right? This is when you don't know that you can sort of move zeros around and make these shortcuts. He doesn't know that. He's just multiplying it the way he was taught by Pacioli. And so you see a lot of multiplications in his notebooks. And it's curious that he should put them in his notebooks. Then you see here, of course, is a multiplication table, right? 2 times 2, 4. 2 times 3, 6. 2 times 4, 8. So he's teaching himself the multiplication table. He just creates a multiplication table like everybody has to memorize in school. And sure enough, he has one in there.